On the early morning of June 7th, 1995, in southwest Atlanta, Georgia, a 14-year-old teenage girl, Nicole Smith, her 16-year-old elder sister, Nikita Lamar, and one of their friends were on their way to school. Along the way, Nacole realized that she had left her homework at home, so she told her companions that she was going back home to get her homework. However, she decided to use a shortcut which their mother had warned them not to use. She walked through a wooded area where there were no people so that she can reach home faster and also get to school in time. Unfortunately, while inside the woods, she came across a 20-year-old man named Kevin Arnold. The man attacked her, then sexually assaulted her. He then shot her to death before escaping the crime scene. Human beings can sometimes be so wicked. This is the story of Nicole Smith. Nacole Smith was born in the year 1981 in southwest Atlanta, Georgia. She was born into a family of 2 siblings. She had an elder sister who was known as Nikita Lamar and a younger brother. They all lived together at Deerfield Apartments in Landrum Drive in southwest Atlanta, Georgia, where they were raised by their single mother, a hardworking woman by the name of Nacole Smith. Nacole Smith went to Ralph Bunche Middle School, where she was always a straight A student. Nacole often spent her free time tutoring the younger kids in the neighborhood. Because of her love for children, she wanted to become a pediatrician when she grows up, so that she can treat them when they are sick. In the year 1995, she was in her 8th grade, and she was about to graduate from middle school. She was looking forward to joining high school. So in the early morning of June 7th, 1995, at around 8:30 a.m., Nicole, who was 14 years old, and her elder sister Nikita, who was 16 years old, left their Deerfield apartment as they headed to their school, which was 6 miles away from their apartment. They were joined by one of their friends. The 3 of them were on their way walking to school. Together, they stopped at a nearby gas station convenience store to grab some snacks before continuing with their journey to school. But once at the gas station, Nicole realized that she had left her homework at home. She told her sister and their friend that they should continue with their journey to school because she was going back home to get her homework, and she would be using a shortcut, which was in the woods. The shortcut led to 2 apartment buildings, and there was a makeshift trail that had been created by people using the passage to get back and forth. The woods were heavily covered with a lot of trees. There was also some kind of darkness in it. Unfortunately, their mother had warned them several times against using that shortcut, which was in the woods. But because she didn't want to be late for school, she defied her mother's orders and used the shortcut. While walking in the woods, she came across a 20-year-old man named Kevin Arnold. The man attacked her inside the woods. He sexually assaulted her and shot her to death. The attacker then fled away from the crime scene. At about 9:20 a.m., 2 security guards at a nearby apartment complex next to Nicole's home had heard gunshots coming from the wooded area just off Campbellton Road, so they went into the woods to check out what was going on. As they followed the trail through the trees, they came across a body of a young teenager lying on the ground. She was dead. So they called 911. At 9:35 a.m., the police arrived at the scene. They discovered that the victim had been badly beaten and had 2 gunshot wounds in the head. They discovered that she had been shot at a point-blank range. Near her body, they found her clothes, books, and her school bag containing her identification documents and address. When they looked through her identification documents, they found out that she was Nicole Smith. The police then took the body to a funeral home, and immediately they began their investigations to find her killer. But first, 2 officers went to Nacole Smith's apartment at 12 p.m. and knocked on the door. When Nacole, who was Nacole Smith's mother, opened the door, she met 2 officers standing there. It also happened that Nacole Smith had earlier on heard gunshot sounds coming from the woods. A few minutes later, she had also heard the police siren heading that way, but she didn't know what was going on there. The officers asked her if she had a daughter named Nicole Smith. When she confirmed that she did, they informed her that her body had been found in the woods, and they requested a photo of her daughter. Aquanelia was suddenly hit by a great shock which overwhelmed her. She retreated to her room and locked herself in the bathroom and began praying. When she returned to the living room with her daughter's photo, the police confirmed that indeed the teenager in the photo was the victim who had been murdered. Aquanelia Smith couldn't believe that her daughter, Nacole Smith, was dead, so she hurriedly called her school to check if she was there. Unfortunately, the school informed her that her daughter Nicole didn't report to school that day. It was at that moment that the crushing reality about Nacole Smith's death hit Aquanelia so hard that she struggled with disbelief. The police called her to the funeral home to identify the body of her daughter. Upon arriving at the funeral home, she confirmed indeed that the body was that of her 14-year-old daughter, Nicole Smith. She mourned in pain for her loss. The body was then taken for an autopsy, and the medical examiner discovered that Nicole Smith had been sexually assaulted and beaten before being shot to death twice in the face. The police continued investigating the crime scene so that they can gather more evidences that could lead them to Nacole's killer. The detectives found 2 sets of footprints, one set belonging to Nacole and the other made by K-Swiss sneakers belonging to her killer. They were also able to find a 9mm shell casing at the crime scene. They did a ballistic test of the 9mm shell casings against shell casings from other crimes that had took place in that area. They hoped that the test could lead them to Nicole's killer. Unfortunately, there were no matches found. At the crime scene, the police also found the DNA, which belonged to the person who murdered Nicole Smith, and they were able to preserve it. As they looked for witnesses, they were able to get a witness who said that he heard shots and screams coming from the woods. He said that he then saw a light-skinned black male with a gun in his hand wrapped in a bloody shirt running down the trail. He added that he was wearing K-Swiss sneakers. They questioned Nikita, who was Nacole's eldest sister. She said that on that day, while they were heading to school, they visited a gas station convenience store to have some snacks before continuing with their journey to school. Her sister, Nicole, then told them that she had forgotten her homework at home, so she would take a shortcut in the woods to get home faster. Nikita added that she saw a light-skinned black man in his early 20s wearing K-Swiss sneakers standing behind them in line at the convenience store. The description raised immediate alarms for detectives who were already on the lookout for someone wearing those sneakers. The family had no information of anyone who might want Nicole Smith dead, since she was a young teenage girl who had no enemies. So the detectives then left Nikita, and they continued canvassing the area looking for more witnesses. The police went around the neighborhood and surrounding of where the crime took place, questioning hundreds of people in the area, and they collected at least 50 DNA samples. They were unable to find a matching profile of the suspects or gather information that would lead them to an arrest. Over the years, there were no leads or witnesses in Nicole's murder case, so the case went cold. Fortunately, in the year 2002, another homicide detective by the name of Vince Velasquez took over the case. He took the DNA of Nacole's killer, which had been collected from the crime scene and preserved. He then entered that DNA into the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. Unfortunately, there were no matches found in the CODIS. In June 2004, another teenager by the name of Betty Brown also became a victim of sexual assault. Betty Brown was born in the year 1991 in East Point in the suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. One night, she was walking home all alone after coming from Father's Day cookout at a park in East Point, Georgia, when a young black man approached her, grabbed her of Connolly Drive in East Point, pulled her into nearby woods, which was about 3 miles from where Nicole Smith was sexually assaulted and murdered 9 years ago. The attacker threatened to kill her if she didn't do what he said. He then sexually assaulted her. After that, he fled away from the crime scene. Betty ran back home and told her mother about what happened to her. Her mother called the police, who arrived at their house in no time and took her statement. She gave out the description of the man who sexually assaulted her to the police. He was a black man with a medium complexion, He was in his early 30s. He stood 5 feet tall. He had a gap in his front teeth, and he wore gold-framed round glasses. Betty was then rushed to the hospital for treatment. As the police investigated her case, they used a rape kit to collect DNA evidence from her. They were able to get the DNA of the man who sexually assaulted her, and they entered that DNA into the CODIS. Fortunately, when the results were back, the DNA of the man who sexually assaulted Betty was a match to the DNA of the man who sexually assaulted and murdered Nicole Smith 9 years back. That meant that the person who sexually assaulted Betty was the same person who sexually assaulted and murdered Nicole Smith inside the wooded area. Unfortunately, they didn't know his name. Betty sat down with a forensic sketch artist at Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and they drew a composite sketch of the man who sexually assaulted her using the description which she had given them. In the sketch, the man had a gap in his front teeth, and he wore round glasses. When the sketch of the man who sexually assaulted Betty was circulated to the public and media, no one knew who he was. Later on, while canvassing East Point, Georgia, police encountered a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to the sketch. He was brought in for questioning, but he refused to cooperate with the officers, and he declined to provide his DNA sample. This refusal raised suspicions, leading detectives to believe that he might be hiding something, and so determined to uncover the truth, they followed him and obtained his DNA from an alternative source. However, when the DNA was tested against the samples from Nicole and Betty, there was no match. Detectives were shocked because they were sure that he was their suspect. Despite the person now having committed another brutal crime, the cases went cold. Detective Velasquez interviewed many people in order to get the identity of Nicole's killer, but unfortunately, in the year 2017, he retired, and a 26-year-old homicide detective, Scott DeMeester, from the Cold Case Squad with the Atlanta Police Department, took over the case. The case was even featured in the program known as America's Most Wanted, and the sketch of the suspect was placed on billboard on Greenbrier Parkway. But in spite of all of these efforts, they still hadn't identified the perpetrator on the composite sketch. The detectives used genetic genealogy to track the killer's family, using online ancestry and genealogy databases, and just shortly after Christmas in 2021, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations contacted Detective DeMeester with a match to their DNA profiles. It came back to a 49-year-old man named Kevin Arnold. The detectives reviewed Kevin's photo, and they noticed a strong resemblance to the man who had been drawn in the composite sketch by the sketch artist. The perpetrator was 23 years old when he sexually assaulted and murdered Nicole Smith, and he was also 31 years old when he attacked and sexually assaulted Betty. But unfortunately, Kevin Arnold didn't face justice for the sexual assault and the murder of Nicole Smith, and also the attack and sexual assault of Betty Brown, because he died of liver and kidney failure on 29 August 2021 while in hospice care in Fulton County, Georgia, close to where he committed both crimes. It took 26 years for Nicole Smith's murder case to be solved. May her soul rest in peace.